go ahead and record it this time, Stephen. But here to guide us through the gnarly wooded forest of finance is a knight of economic brilliance. He's a proud father of 4. He has shacked up all around Europe, from the Green Isles all the way to the Black Forest. He's here to help us tell stories. He's a modern day Dickens. And he's a kind of a lovable Janet Yellen, I would say. And we're really excited to have him here join us all the way from Ireland. So let's welcome Stephen to the stage. Come on up, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you. I always have to, whenever you introduce, I need about a minute just to get back into the flow again, not only because of the music that you play, which sort of completely distracts me, but I'm also fascinated by this person that you're introducing, that it takes a few seconds for me to realize that it's me you're talking about.
It's you.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody. Really pleased to be able to lead you through 45 minutes of telling stories with financials. Very briefly, to a proper introduction, I've been involved in business as a financial professional and an investor in small and medium-sized businesses for the last 30 years, more or less. I run a company called Good and Prosper, and the heart of Good and Prosper is teaching entrepreneurs to do 2 things. Firstly is to create a vision of success for their own business with an embedded business model in it, and the other one is to teach them how to get really comfortable around the financial numbers coming out of their business and using those numbers to guide strategy and to make them more confident as business owners. So that's what I do. I'm thrilled to be able to partner with Scott and his team at UJ, and over the next 40 minutes, I've been giving you a taste of the course that Scott and his team and I have devised around this subject of getting comfortable with numbers and financial fluency.
And let me just jump in there, Stephen.
Yeah,
I'm so excited. I'm so excited about that. And one of the things we are thrilled about at UJ Accelerated is being able to connect not only knowledge, but also network. And so Stephen is going to be the expert leading the course, but we're also going to have a cadre of peer supporters who are going to be a really powerful asset to the class. We actually have one who joined us. So I was going to just quickly welcome her to the stage to introduce herself. So Tracy, if you don't mind unmuting and just giving us a quick introduction of who you are and a way that maybe people can continue to learn or connect with you.
Sure. Yeah. Hi. Thanks for having me, Scott and Stephen. My name is Tracy Beck, and I am a serial entrepreneur. I come to finance through the sheer need of needing to know how to do finances in business in order to succeed. And through that, I have found my way to consultancy, and specifically financial consultancy with small businesses. I'm a partner at 60-Minute CFO, which is also the name of a book about business finance for small businesses. And really our mission is to reduce the business failure rate due to avoidable financial reasons. And there's, so many reasons that businesses go out of business, but many of them are very, very avoidable. And through simple knowledge of finances that at first, and I can attest to this, were very intimidating to the average business owner who normally gets into business for various reasons, but not often is it because they have a love for finance. So really bringing that finance picture into focus for business owners so that they can feel comfortable and confident in leading their business and doing more of what they love in their business as well.
That's great. Well, so excited to have you, and we'll have other supporters as well that you can meet. So I'll kick it back over to Stephen and just give you a little hint that at the end of this session, you're going to get a special promo code for the class that you can use or share with somebody. So that'll be kind of your reward for playing Stephen's games here today. So excited to have you, and you can learn more about that class at accelerated.uj.edu/financial. So Stephen, we'll kick it over to you.
Thank you. And you just reminded me by putting the screen up. I have my iPad next to me, and I have the presentation on the iPad, and I've just been flicking through it, thinking that just by me flicking through it everybody else was going to be able to see what I was saying. So I'm going to have to say, please go on to the next slide while you're assisting me. And before I kick off, I want to say hi to Tracy. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a peer supporter. You know that I'm a huge fan of 60-Minute CFO, which I think is a next step after the sort of basic financial fluency that I'm hoping to impart, partly with your help over the month course that we're going to be doing at the end of October. So welcome, and thank you so much for your support. If you can, yep, that's it. Every learning journey looks a little bit like this. You start off at a low level. I think there's a level before this with finance, which is the level where people put their heads in the sand or in a bucket or run away. But once you get to the lower levels of competence and it starts becoming interesting, then you progress upwards until a moment comes where you just get it. And that get it moment often remains elusive in finance because of a problem that I'll be going into over the next 10-15 minutes around the mental model that describes finance. But when you have got it, then finance becomes a really, really useful, not only survival tool, but strategic tool in having that conversation with your business and understanding exactly what it is that it needs. So the learning journey, I hope, will be steep, rapid, and at the end of the course, at least, if not at the end of today, you will have a got it moment. Although looking at the number of 4s and 5s on the score that you gave yourselves, I imagine most of you here have already got it and are looking for something else, which I hope you will share with me before the end of the day. So if you can move on to the next slide, please, Scott. Stories. The focus of today's webinar will be on the storytelling nature of finance. And I will probably say this a number of times, but the best strategic advisor that any business operator has, or any investor in a business, are the simple financial reports that over time tell a story of what is happening in the business, where it's going, what it needs, what the assumptions are, or how well the business is doing, whether it's thriving or not, and understanding where to look and letting those numbers month for month or week for week, quarter for quarter, year for year, tell their story of the business are what make the financial reports so important and such a strong source of inspiration for strategic decision making. And the stories that we tell ourselves, whether we know that we're telling them or not, are what we do as a species in order to survive and make sense of the world around us. There's a fabulous book written by Christopher Booker, who died, I think, last year. It was published posthumously, called The 7 Basic Plots, in which he takes this enormous arc in, I think, 700 or 800 pages, and looks at the way that we construct stories. And he basically breaks it down into 7 distinct plots that every single story is constructed around. And it's also a very interesting examination of why we tell stories to each other. So the description of what a story is, and always reflecting this back on the storytelling aspect of your financial numbers that are coming out of the business. Firstly, it's a sequence of mental images. So what we do is we translate words or numbers into pictures that make some sort of sense or drive some sort of emotional response. A story is always, to an extent, a hero's journey, it moving from a state of unfulfilled hope or oppression to fulfillment and freedom. The story is also a cycle of events, so the things happening that describe the evolution of the hero and the world that he or she inhabits. Then there are characters that come into play with each other that either prevent or support the hero on his journey. And at the very end, there is a quest for meaning and redemption. And there is a a famous American sociologist and writer who wrote a book around, in fact, he based his entire career around the hero's journey, which shows sort of the reluctant hero starting off, and then he moves through various phases, 17 all in all. And the end of the hero's journey is a life of freedom, freedom from the evil that he's gone through, freedom to rule, or freedom to take over his life again. And in a very real sense, the hero's journey of a business is the quest for a life of freedom, a life of an ability to create wealth and what I call capacity to serve clients, the capacity to make a difference, the capacity to serve, the capacity to provide for an employee's family, and the capacity to create wealth. And in that creation of capacity lies the ultimate goal of business, which is freedom to create a life that we desire. So stories are dangerous things, though, because if you go on to the next slide, please, Scott, we prefer, as Bob Seawright wrote in his wonderful letter about 6 months ago, we prefer to think linearly. We make stories up. We manufacture a storyline with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we are extremely susceptible to the narrative fallacy. In other words, we whether we like it or not, we will tell ourselves stories, even if we don't understand or misinterpret the information that we're getting, because we inherently prefer and understand stories to data and numbers. We're not, as a species, particularly good with numbers, and we are subject to all sorts of fallacies, traps. We're not very good at thinking in probabilities. We're really bad at thinking in geometrics rather than averages. We tend to make some very basic mistakes around statistics when we're presented with them. We will assign false probabilities. And so what we do to compensate for that is we try to pick out one or two bits of information and then tell ourselves a story. And if that story is wrong, the decisions we obviously make around them will also be wrong, which is why it's really important to understand the basic facts coming out of financial statements, so that when we do put them in a story, and you're going to one way or another, but when we do put them into a story, that the stories make sense. One of the reactions that I get very often, not often, I have to admit, in a group who rates themselves 4 or 5 on the scale of competence, is I hear some variation of this, which is when I have to engage with financials, my eyes glaze over, my mind goes blank, my head shuts down, my head drifts off, I can't think straight. It'll be some variation of a sense of overwhelm that prevents us from thinking, not just in a straight line, but from thinking at all. There are reasons for those, and we'll go into them in a minute. But before we go into what causes that, I would love to have some feedback from you in a poll as to whether looking at financial numbers is stressful or not. Given the answers that you've given already, I suspect that the answer is going to come back no, but let's just have a look at that, Scott, please.
Sure, just give us a yes or no. Is numbers stressful for you? Even if you've done a lot of it, is it still something that stresses you out? Thank you for being brave. Marisol coming in hot. I like that. Once upon a time, exactly. I think that's part of it, is like, even when you're skilled, there's some stress. So that's interesting to me. What do you think, Stephen? We have skilled people who are still stressed by
it. That's very interesting. It wasn't what I was expecting at all, not given the previous responses. I think the question that you asked beforehand was similar, though, wasn't it? What was the question that you asked beforehand?
It was 1 to 5 confidence, I think, on numbers. Yeah, or experience maybe. So
confident but stressed.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we would have to look and see.
Sounds like parenting.
We're right. Okay, if we can move on to the next question, which if you are stressed, what changes when you have financial fluency? In other words, what do you think, in just a word or a phrase, what do you think changes as an entrepreneur, as a business operator, even as an employee wanting to understand this stuff? What do you think changes when you have financial fluency? It's the one thing the biggest change that you think you'll experience.
A lot of confidence. Yeah, and maybe think back to when you started to gain that knowledge, right? Like, we probably weren't born with this. So what happens when you get better at the numbers?
Confidence, more vision. I like that. Confidence. See, confidence is really interesting. It's an interesting word, because what confidence means is that you start trusting the information that you're processing. You start having a relationship that will allow you to believe and to construct a narrative that you trust is a fair reflection of the reality, rather than having one or two bits of information that you're absolutely not sure about, but you think that you can join the dots. But there's this constant anxiety that you've got it wrong because you don't really understand it. So confidence allows you to tell a better story. And it's the story, as we will see later on, that allows you to make better decisions and to understand what's happening to your business. So why is this stuff so difficult? And according to Gary Larson, this has been around for a very long time. Thousands of years, people have struggled with math, evidently. And if you can take us on to the next slide, the matrix, please, Scott. Thank you. My model for sort of figuring this out of what happens when people get mind blanked or overwhelmed by finance or don't have confidence is that they are in one of these squares. I'm going to start at the top right-hand corner in the blue square. The blue square is the top, if you like, the best place to be on a XY axis, and the two axes are important to irrelevant. So a subject is either important to you or it's not important. On the x-axis, and on the y-axis, the vertical one, it's either familiar or unfamiliar. So starting off in a place where you are familiar and it's important, that would be all the stuff that is basically in your job. It's important that you do it correctly. It's important that you understand it. It's important for you personally. It's important for the people around you. It has import. So it's the consequences of the decision making and your professional attention make a difference. It's important. And if it's also familiar, then that is where you become professional. So something that you're familiar with, that is important, generally tends to center around your main competence, your professional competence. And what you have in your head when you get information coming into your world as a professional is you have a robust mental model to process all that information. You're concentrated, you're alert, and you're effective because you know what to do with the information coming in. So imagine you're being bombarded constantly in your job with information, data, questions, reports, context, information from colleagues, emails. You will be able to look at those and immediately decide what to do with it. Is it important? Is it not important? Do I have to deal with it immediately? Yes or no? Where does this go? Where does it fit into my model of the world? And by doing that, your brain lets the information in. It doesn't overwhelm you. You know when you have to concentrate. You know when you have to slow down. You know when you have to speed up. You know what to do with information coming into that quadrant. If you go to the left, you are now in the area where you are also familiar, but I've used the word irrelevant or not important. And this would be a hobby, something that it didn't really matter whether you did it or not. Let's say you were a stamp collector and some information came in, or maybe an opportunity. Now you can give it importance, but you know that the consequence of not buying that stamp or not taking that collection or not doing or not tidying it up is going to lead to exactly zero consequences other than in your own personal value system. The world isn't going to fall to pieces and nobody's depending on you sticking the stamp in your album. So in that state, you have a robust mental model because it's familiar. You know what to do. You can process the information exactly as you did in the professional sphere, but you're in your creative flow, but it's not that important. If you go down to the pink square, you're now in the area where you have something that's both irrelevant and unfamiliar. And I call that laissez-faire. You don't have a mental model for processing information, but you don't care because the information that is coming in, you're going to ignore it, and you don't care one way or the other. So you make no effort. It doesn't overwhelm you. It doesn't produce any sense of anxiety because you don't know it. Just to give my example, if somebody talks about motor cars or possibly American football, it's fascinating maybe, but I don't get stressed if I don't understand a word that somebody's talking about because I have no interest and it's not really relevant for me. The really important square, as far as financial fluency is concerned in our talk, is the bottom right-hand one, the orange one. That is where there is the subject matter is unfamiliar, but it's also important, and you know it's important. And that produces a high level of anxiety. You're being bombarded with information, but you don't have a robust mental model. You know that the subject is important, possibly even crucial, but you have no way of knowing what to do with that information. You don't even know if you've understood it, let alone know where to sort it. And what we do in those situations, in those high anxiety situations, depends a little bit on our personality types, but there are two possible responses. One of which is to move the subject to the left. In other words, you say things that make it appear that it's irrelevant. I don't really like numbers. I was never very good at maths. I'm a people person. It's all old numbers anyway. I don't really have time for this. I've got people to do it. There are 1,000 excuses that people will use in order to push the anxiety creating lack of a mental model over to the left, where it then becomes irrelevant without having to deal with the unfamiliarity. And the other direction they can go, obviously, is up and take it from unfamiliar to familiar. That's hard work. That requires a sense of wanting to have that state of professional, what I call creative attention, and a mental model that will then give you the confidence to deal with it. So whenever you're learning something new, whenever you're in anxiety, there is a very high probability that you are being confronted with something that is important but unfamiliar. And this whole idea of mental models is based on the idea that your brain will not let information in. It just won't, if it doesn't know what to do with it, simply because the energy that it takes for us to process information is so enormous that our brains will not use that energy if they don't know what to do with the information coming in. Okay, so that's the sort of framework that people will find themselves in, and it's particularly relevant to finance because not many of us have robust mental models to deal with that. Perhaps we can just jump on quickly now. Okay, so what's a mental model? A mental model is it's a belief system or a thinking system that allows you to process information and that fits a certain pattern that allows you to come to conclusions very quickly. So you can sort of plug it in, knows where to go, and you come out with some sort of conclusion. My own belief is that your belief system, whatever you believe about yourself and about the world, absolutely defines your operating system. Next slide, please. And that the only way to deal with that is to reframe the way you think about finance and business. And there are three ways I think you can achieve this. Firstly, you can look at your business as a living dynamic entity. It is not just a box or a mechanism with an input-output function where you put stuff in and something else comes out at the other side. It's dynamic because it's a living entity. It's made up of people and all of the things that people bring with them, so that it's a social construct and therefore a living thing on its own right. And if you look at the business as a living dynamic entity, then the financial statements are one of the ways in which the business is communicating with the outside world. And most importantly, it's communicating with you as its owner and director. It's looking to you for guidance, and it's telling you through the financials how it's doing, what it needs, in the way that a baby screams. I don't speak baby. And when I had my children, I had to learn very quickly, because they're not going to tell me in English, or at least not in a language that I understood, what was wrong with them and which end I had to be dealing with. And as a consequence, I had to learn to understand the language, the somatic language that they were talking to me in. And the business is exactly the same. It won't tell you in English, but it will tell you what it needs as it moves through life. The second way, the second mindset, is to look at all the numbers that are being produced as a story. And with the business, not you as the main protagonist. You are intimately tied to the business in the same way that Sancho Panza had his donkey to sit on in The Man from La Mancha or Don Quixote. But the story is about the business, and it's the numbers that are telling the story of that business. And if you approach finance with the mindset of wanting to know what the story is, rather than just understanding the one sentence that you've got in front of you, then you will find the business will tell you a very rich story as you learn to understand the language that it's talking to you in. And the third thing that I would suggest is a valuable way of looking at a business is to think like an investor. So if you're thinking like an investor, you're treating it as a dynamic entity and you're acutely aware of the stories that it's telling. That will allow you to create a new mantra instead of the I don't understand this stuff, or I was never any good at maths, to say the new mantra is that I am all of these things. I am an investor, my business is alive and it's a dynamic entity, and I'm listening for the story that it's going to tell me through the numbers. Okay, if you can go on, please. There's a lovely book called Storytelling with Data by a woman called Cole Nussbaumer-Knaflick, who's also got a great name. And she goes into a lot of detail in the book on how to construct stories from numbers and to present them visually in a way that you can communicate what it is that you want. And she says, nobody teaches us how to tell stories with numbers. Adding to the challenge, very few people feel naturally adept in this space. Very few people feel naturally adept. But being able to visualize data and tell stories with it is key to turning information that can be used to drive better decision making. And that's what it's all about. Okay, if you can kick on, please. Very, very quickly, I could spend hours talking about this. Does anybody know what this is?
Feel free to drop it in the chat or just unmute.
Yeah,
No, just unmute and
somebody has
sorry?
it.
No idea what that is.
No idea,
Okay.
Jill?
Okay, it's a map of Napoleon's army on the 1812 to 1813 march to Moscow, which ended in disaster. The light brown block is the size of the army. It started just inside what is now Poland and marched all the way to Moscow. And as the line gets thinner and thinner, the brown one, that is the attrition of the men that died on the way. And the black line is the one on the way back. This map is famous. It was drawn by a man called Charles Minard because it has seven different layers of data: temperature, distance, size of the army, direction, geography, time, and a number of other temperature, 7 different aspects or dimensions of data packed into one two-dimensional map with an enormous richness of content, and at the same time an enormously tragic story that once you've understood what this is, not just two lines, a brown one and a black one, but once you look and see the full horror of the tragedy that Napoleon unleashed on his army that started off with about 400,000 and came back with under 36,000, you will suddenly see how powerful a graphic description of numbers put in that sort of form can be. Okay, go on, please. One of the ways that we will be exploring in the course is looking at art and poetry as a way into a mental model that works for finance. Because I've been in this business for, I don't know, 30 years. I started off as someone who was a liberal arts student. I studied ancient German, medieval German literature at university, so I was miles away from finance. So I've always brought a storyteller's mind to it, and I can very well remember how difficult I found this stuff to start with. But one thing that I've always understood, and if you go on to the next slide, please, is something that W.H. Auden said in his New York lectures, which in the 1950s, which is that poetry is the clear expression of mixed feelings. What he was saying is that we turn to poetry because it captures some very strange and unusual sort of mixture of feelings that we can't quite put our finger on, but when the poet expresses it, we immediately get it. And art is nothing other than the use of certain medium to express a complex situation in the form of a picture or in words, which immediately resonates with us. And because it's complex and we're not quite sure how it all works together, it mirrors what's happening in finance. If you look at financial statements are also a clear expression of very mixed things that are going on behind. There's a complex sort of series of activities going on that are condensed into this one set of numbers that are telling a story that makes sense if you understand how to look at it and where to look in order to get the information. And it's exactly the same as the way that we interact with art. You can go on, please. I learned as a child, or as a young man in my sort of early teens, because I had a superb history of art teacher, that there is a big difference between observing and interpreting, and that it is absolutely critical for us to learn the difference, to just look at something, catalog what we're seeing before assigning attributes and trying to understand the story. What people will do in finance is that they will start telling themselves the story before they've actually seen what's happening, because they don't know what they're looking at. And we're going to try this for 5 minutes with a very simple, or maybe not so simple, but a very interesting exercise, which we spend an entire lesson on in the course. So if you can jump to the next one, please. Very quickly, you've got 10 seconds to write down in the chat, what do you see?
Go ahead and type it in. Welcome to our new attendees who jumped in.
Okay, Teddy Joe can see a, okay, keep going, please.
Martian, a cow,
We've got
skin.
a turtle, a skeleton, a corpse with eyes and teeth, aerial map or something.
I do see that.
All right. Okay. Can I have the turtle?
MG Hegstead, come to the stage if you want to unmute.
Can I give you the mic, please? Okay.
Hello.
Thank you.
All right, we got you.
Can you just explain to us very briefly where the turtle is?
It's in the lower left-hand corner.
Okay. What's that?
So that's the turtle shell.
Okay. And what's the rest of it?
Up high is its head. And
can you point to the head? Where's the head?
There.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And here's a foot, turtle foot.
Ah, yeah. Okay. Got it.
And then if it had another arm, it'd be up here.
Okay. Absolutely wrong. Good. Thank you, MV. Who can we
Tanya
have?
Was in. She was going with it, so you gotta you convinced some people.
Can I have Crystal? Can you explain the cow to us, please?
Yes. Okay. So you got the cow's head, its mouth, its ears. It's by a fence.
Okay. Can you tell us where that is for people who can't, who are still seeing turtles? Can you please explain exactly where the ears and the eyes and the nose are?
Okay.
Where's the body?
The ear. There's one ear in the middle
Left,
of
the left-hand side. Okay.
left-hand side. The other one is to the right. The face, the head is right here. I don't know if people can see my. Yeah.
Oh, look at this. This is
there.
very fancy. Okay.
The eyes are here. The mouth is here. The body is going to the right.
And what's the turtle? What do you think the turtle is?
It's a fence.
It's a fence. Okay. MB, could you tell me, can I get you back on the stage, please?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Can you see that now?
Yeah, I can totally see it. It's better. Cow is better than my turtle.
That's because it really is a cow. See, the turtle explains some of the data. It doesn't explain all of it. And roughly 60% of you, I think, I haven't done the math on this, but roughly 60, maybe 70% of you were not seeing the cow. And because you weren't seeing the cow, you were ignoring all the information that would have suggested to you that it was a cow, because you'd already decided, and the story that you were telling yourselves was that this is a turtle or a skeleton or an aerial map of something or something. Fascinating. And once you see it, you think, oh yeah, you can't actually unsee it anymore. You can't go back and see the turtle because the turtle doesn't explain everything. The cow explains everything. Okay, very quickly, and I'm really having to rush through this, and I'm sorry. One of the things that I would have done if we had a bit more time, go on to the next slide, please, is to tell this story. Does anybody recognize this painting?
Looks like it's a Vermeer.
No.
Is it a Vermeer?
No.
No. Okay.
Okay, it's a Velasquez. It was painted when he was about 20. Does anybody know the painting? Know what it is? What it stands for? No? Okay. Well, what I would do with you normally, and we don't have the time, and we will spend a whole lesson of this on the course, is I will get you to catalog absolutely everything you can see on this painting. Everything. Without making any attributions. And once you've cataloged everything, then, and listen to each other, because what you will find is that some people will see one thing and others will see something else. And you will find that as you get deeper and deeper into it, you start seeing more and more and more. Just cataloging, not making any assumptions about what's happening in the picture. Then we go on and the next stage and start adding attributes and saying, well, what about, you know, what do you think, what's happening in this in the painting? What can you tell about the figure in the front or the figures in the back? Or is there any movement in this painting? Or is there, and as you will see, slowly but surely, when all of those things come together, the catalogs and the attributions, you will start to see a story. And if we have time, I'll come back to it at the end of this, and I'll tell you what's going on in this painting, because it is a fascinating story behind it, not just what's happening in the painting, but where the painting came from. So we don't have time for that now, so we'll have to rush through that, and we can do that with Picasso's Guernica as well. You can in fact do it with any painting or any piece of art. But that leads straight into what I call the entrepreneur's canvas. And the entrepreneur's canvas is for me, it's the explanation of why this all makes sense, and where finance needs to be embedded. Because Bernie Goldhirsch, who was the founder and publisher of Inc. magazine, a magazine that you're probably all aware of, said, never forget, he said this to one of his editors, who is a friend of mine, never forget that entrepreneurs are artists who have chosen business as their mode of expression, right for them. Next slide, please. And why is that important, and how artists and entrepreneurs are very, very similar in many of their attributes. They're intuitive, they're creative, they have to think outside the box, they're often obsessed, they are focused on production, they have to get things out of the door, they have to sell stuff, they have to create something. They are visionary because they can see things that other people can't see. They are in a constant process of discovery, oft very bored of just doing the iterative work of actual production. They have a very clear purpose, they love getting attention, they know how to get it, and they have to abolish perfectionism, otherwise they'd never get anything done. So if you keep going, please. Business is the story of how entrepreneur artists turn money into things and then things back into money again. And that's what finance measures. Finance measures how money gets turned into things and things get turned back into money again in an endless cycle. And what finance does is tell you how that's happening. It tells you how much money is being turned into what things and what the process of turning it back into money again looks like. So if we can just jump on, please. Okay, this is a graphic description. This is something that comes out of the course, sticky notes, using sticky notes. You've got two things, it's like a T, and you've got money things on one side and you've got things on the other side. And can anybody tell me very quickly what that is in the middle, what that descriptive block of sticky notes might be, with money on one side and things on the other? It's a T account. And what's a T account? What does a T account end up as when it grows up and gets all its friends together? What do hundreds of T accounts turn into? Okay, it turns into a balance sheet. That's a balance sheet. That's the European or Venetian way. It's how the Venetians used to do a balance sheet, and it's how the Europeans still do it. The Anglo-Saxons do it on top of each other. They take sort of various blocks and organize them in a different way. But forget that for the moment. What a balance sheet is telling you, it's a canvas that is capturing what the artist entrepreneur is doing with the money available to him or her, what he's turning it into. So he's taking money on the one side, he's turning it into something called fixed assets and current assets, just call them stuff. And that stuff then needs to get turned back into money through a process called selling. And the selling process then captures all the other things that, all the people that contribute to that. If you like, the money comes in at the top and you've got this row of people all with their hand out in a certain order. Your suppliers get it first, and then your staff, and then your landlord, and then you've got your accountants and the other people who are helping you in your SG&As. Then you've got interest in the bank, and then you've got the tax man. And right at the end, whatever comes out is your money, and it goes straight back into the balance sheet again, and then gets turned into things again. And that continuous process of turning money into things, putting them through the sales process, which is called the profit and loss statement, ending up with some money left over at the end, which then goes back into the money side of the balance sheet. That continuous process is what finance measures. It's telling you how well you're doing it. It's telling you what's left over. It's telling you what you're turning money into. It's telling you how much money is, how that money is being recycled. It's telling you what the liquidity of the things that you're turning it into are. It's telling you how much value you're creating for your customers. It's telling you all of those things. And it's doing it in real time, all the time. And the story that you are telling, that the business is telling you about itself, is the story that you need to pay attention to by just understanding That very simple structure of turning money into things and then back into money again. And that's it. That's all that's happening in finance. And there are, of course, it gets more granular than that. And there are different sorts of things that money ends up into, and there are different types of money that come in. But at the heart, that's what's happening. If you can just jump on, please. Okay, I'm going to do this in a sort of slightly more schematic way. The finances that you get on your desk at the end of every month, at the beginning of the new month, will only be capturing a fraction of what you as an entrepreneur actually have to manage. And what you actually have to manage, so you've got assets and liabilities. Liability is money and assets are things. So you've got the money and things side of things, and it has to balance, because you can't, for every penny that you get of money, you have to have an equal amount of things on the other side, because it can't disappear. What you've also got to manage is what I call the meta balance sheet. All the intangibles that define you and your business, the stuff that you bring and the stuff that your work creates. And if you can go through, Scott, just very quickly clicking through, there is a whole different balance sheet that you are also managing. And we will go into this in the course in great detail as to how the balance sheet that you see as an entrepreneur is completely different to the one that your accountants will be presenting you with, because the material balance sheet, the one that actually measures the stuff that you can drop on your foot, is only a part of the equation, and it is the result of all of these other things like experience and know-how and contacts and network and time and passion and talent and capabilities and interests, and it results in innovation and problem solving and service quality and culture and brand and all of these things. And in total, it's your reputation, your trust that you have in the marketplace, and the things that as an entrepreneur you are also managing on a day-to-day basis but are not captured anywhere. Okay, if we can go on, please. This is a really simple story. It's a really simple story of revenue numbers that I've filched from a friend of mine called Susan Trivers, who helps business owners, particularly in the small and medium business space, to be more intelligent around their pricing. And there are 5 different stories that these numbers are telling. And no, keep going back, please. No. Okay. At a very simple level, story number 1 is in the last year, this company did 2.7 million in revenue, and this year it's only done 2.5 in revenue. So the first story is sales have gone down. Then a closer look at the revenue breakdown will tell you that 531 clients were responsible for that. And basically this consulting company had 7 products, which is the second part of a second and third part of the story. So there's 531 clients and there are 7 products. Now, interestingly enough, the top sellers, which accounted for 50% of the revenue, were just 2 of the products. So 2 of those products of those 7 were responsible for over half of that revenue. Around about 10%, just below, were 2 low margin, which left the rest for 3. What they also found out, and that's stories 3 and 4, and the or rather 2 and 3. And the fourth story that it's telling you that you can't see from there, but the business found out, was that that 65% of the clients for those top 2 products were all very similar and had similar attributes. And the team, the CFO, went away and created a 5th story, which was they understood that the revenue was in fact being driven by hourly billing, when after asking their clients, it became clear that billing on an hourly basis was really not the most sensible thing to do, but they should be billing on a value-based basis, and that the clients were more than happy to pay for that. So from 2 very simple numbers and some background information from the financials, there are already 5 stories that that were extractable from this simple overview at the top level. And you have obviously much more detailed financials, but those are the sort of stories that the simple stories, simple heuristics that you will learn to understand and extract in order to make better decisions. Okay, I think we can go for, I'm almost done, I think. There are 5 basic principles that I would like to leave you with. Number 1, money is energy. You've often heard that, but it has no will of its own, and it only ever goes where it's intentionally directed. That is the artistic entrepreneurial act. It's telling the money where to go, and either you do that intentionally, you do it unintentionally, but whatever, money never goes anywhere on its own. So being intentional about where you're directing money and the sort of things that you're putting it into is extremely important. And it's part of, I would say, it's the ultimate entrepreneurial act. So the act of entrepreneurship is the intentional act of turning money into things and back into money again. And finance just captures that process. And the balance sheet is, if you like, the canvas that tells you the entire history of every single brushstroke that you've taken and decision that you've made. If you can go on, yep. So the sum of all of those numbers over time make up the painting. And as you progress in your entrepreneurial life, that painting is either going to be telling its own story, or it isn't, or it's going to be a mess. And if it's a mess, then that's also telling a story. But every single decision you take is a brushstroke on the canvas that is adding to that story. And the final one that I want to leave you with is that the business is a living entity with a character and destiny of its own, but it is conditioned and formed by the owner, much as a child is formed and conditioned by parents. But it is a living entity with a life and destiny of its own. So if we can go, and I'll leave you with a quote by Richard Feynman, Professor Feynman, who is probably one of the most famous physicists and scientists of the last century, in which he said in his 1974 Caltech address, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Financial fluency is about letting the business talk to you directly and not fooling yourself as to what is in there or maybe what isn't, particularly around the quality of the numbers that you're getting. So 3 mental models, just to sum them up again: looking at your business as a dynamic entity, numbers as storytelling, and learning to speak the language of business and thinking like an investor of your business. Those are the pillars through which will support the course that we're doing at UJ in October and November. That's what the course map is. You can have a look at that, and I'm happy to send you this presentation or that course map, and I think you'll probably find it on the website at accelerated.uj.edu. We are running from the 26th of October to the 18th of November, and we'll be covering all this in a lot more detail than I was able to do in the 45 minutes that you gave me. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's give Stephen a virtual round of applause. If you can show him, it's yeah, there you go. As you can see, this is really powerful stuff. I think a very approachable way to understand and capture finance. And so one thing we want to do is make sure that people who need this skill get it, right? And so we want to invite you or someone you know to this class. It'll be every Tuesday and Thursday for 90 minutes from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Central. So this exact time of this webinar. And as you can see, we'll go through these lessons, everything from the story of numbers to balance sheets, profit and loss. And then I really like this idea of coming up with a single KPI. He calls it your personal stock price. So you have one number to look at as a business person to tell, are things going the right way? So you can sign up for that right now at accelerated.uj.edu. And if you want to go into /financial. The other thing we want to do today, since you are our advocates and our ambassadors, is we do have a promo code for our attendees like you. And since it's October 12th, the code is finance12. So I'm just going to show you how to do that real quick and show you the site here. So I think you can still see my screen. Here you can see the financial fluency course. So to sign up, you just click on sign up for the financial decision-making course. You fill in your details here, pretty easy. I'll just quick fill it. And then when you go to the payment, all you have to do is choose the course and type in finance 12. So that'll be available here for the next 24 hours, and that'll get you 12% off. So you can use that yourself, or if you're feeling generous, you can share that with someone, because we know that a lot of you are 4s and 5s, and maybe this is your your wheelhouse, something you're comfortable with, but I think we all know someone who might benefit from a course like this. And as you can tell, spending 90 minutes with Stephen twice a week is going to be a fun time. You're going to learn a lot and have a great time. So
Thank
we
you.
will, yeah, thanks Stephen for joining us, and look forward to having him start his course. UJ Accelerated has a number of courses that are starting this fall and then ramping up into 2022. I'll send you an email with an invite to our community. As someone who's joined our promo course, our sample course, you have access to our calendar to communicate with us and to continue learning. I really believe learning is a lifelong pursuit, and that you can continue to keep your mind sharp and accelerate your career, whether that's moving up in what you currently do or move into a new career. So we want to thank you for joining us. We'll stick around.
I'm happy to stay on. I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes if anybody has any questions, by the way.
Yeah, that's perfect. So we'll stick on for questions. If you have anything you need from me, feel free to stay on or reach out. And feel free to also purchase that course for someone else. We can register someone on your behalf. So you just email me and let me know who that might be. So thanks for joining us and for spreading the word. And we look forward to seeing you online soon. Have a great day. And if you have questions, feel free to unmute and chat with us. All right, we'll wait a sec here and see if anyone jumps in. Is there a nonprofit discount from Marisol? That's a great question, Marisol. We don't have one currently, but I'd be willing to kind of chat about that. Maybe let me know, if you want to unmute, you can let me know which nonprofit you're with, or you can send me an email. We can figure that out. I should have mentioned we are trying to connect with businesses as well and organizations. So definitely interested in having groups of students maybe take it together.